A recent report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, and Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, reveals a growing willingness among Nigerians to resist and report bribery. The report indicates that over 70% of Nigerians refused to pay bribes in 2023, with fewer citizens facing negative consequences for refusing bribe requests compared to 2019. Additionally, more citizens are reporting bribery incidents, and there has been a significant increase in the initiation of formal procedures against public officials accused of bribery. The report suggests that anti-corruption efforts are gaining traction in Nigeria, and citizens are increasingly empowered to demand accountability from public officials. Joining us from our Abuja studio is the Principal Data Analyst at National Bureau of Statistics, Shamsuddin Lawal. Thank you for joining us. We also have the National Program Officer, Anti-Corruption, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Princess Chief Yero. Thank you for joining us as well. All right, let me begin with you on this matter, talking about Shamsuddin Lawal. A lot of Nigerians would be interested on how data was gathered to get the report that we finally got at the end of the day.
Okay, good morning, listeners. As we released in the report, this is the third round of the survey. As a form of background, let me start with the first round of the survey that was conducted 2016, and the second round of the survey was conducted in 2019, while the recent release report was conducted last year, 2023. And we had some improvement in the 2023 data collection, whereby we added some question that has to do with gender dimensions, disability dimensions, as well as location where the bribery happened. As a form of understanding the methodology, how we gathered the data, the survey was basically household-based survey, not like administrative survey or administrative data collection. We went to citizens, we went to the population of Nigeria to gather the data across 36 states of the Federation and FCT. So also to understand the methodology, we randomly selected 900 households in each of the state and FCT, and when we went to these selected households, we collected what we call the demographics, that is the household roster, members living in the household, whereby we used tablet to collect the data, and the tablet randomly selected adults within the household, whereby we ask them questions that has to do with their experiences and few questions that has to do with their own perception. But the results in the report are majorly experienced by those selected respondents. Someone will ask, is that what we reported only from what we collected? No. We try to raise the result so that the result can be representative of all the domains, the entire country, the states, and other disaggregation that has to do with education, disability, gender, as I mentioned. So that's that about the background of the survey.
And how confident are you in the outcome of this study, in the sense that, some persons may have a different understanding of what they see as bribery? We're in a time where we make use of technology, and bribery to some persons may just be the exchange of cash and the exchange of favor. So how much of reliability can we get in this study?
Sorry, come again. How much what?
How reliable is this study?
So the survey is very reliable because we really conducted using a robust methodology, and UNODC really guided us, because this is not the first time we are conducting this survey. The survey is very reliable, and people can check the methodology section to know how we, in detail, how we conducted the survey.
All right, let me come to you now, Princess Chifero. Talk to us about what this means for Nigeria as a country, because we know that often the time when our politicians are campaigning, one of the issues they want to address is a matter of fighting corruption. Does this show that we are on our way to really dealing with the matters of corruption from the root, and that perhaps we are doing something right at the end of the day?
Indeed. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me on the show. Yes, indeed, it does show some progress being made by Nigeria. A couple of things that I will mention. One of the things that the report kind of feeds into is Nigeria's commitment to fulfilling the implementation of its UNCAC, which is the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption, which Nigeria is a signatory to. Within that convention, we have 2 key articles that speaks to, or that encourages states to, be more transparent and collect data on corruption. Article 10 and Article 61. Article 10, looking at public reporting, encouraging more transparency around public administration, but also reporting. And then Article 61, which is really about collecting data to help you measure trends, but also the efficiency and effectiveness of your anti-corruption initiatives. So within that, if we look at it from that angle, you see that Nigeria has done not 1, but 3 corruption surveys. That is a positive in itself. But the results are beginning to show from, from what is emerging at this third iteration of the survey, which is 1, citizens are saying no, enough is enough. We know what is the right thing to do, and are saying we will do the right thing. So they're kicking back. Secondly, they are willing to report, which means there's been some trust in the system, which means, of course, Nigeria is doing right. The public institutions must be doing something right to encourage citizens reporting. Because between 2016, when we started, to now, we had reporting was at 3.5, 3.6%, if I remember correctly, and then suddenly we have about 8.6%. That is some improvement. That doesn't take away the fact that we still have a lot of work to do, but at least we are seeing some progress. So I think it's important to acknowledge this progress, and kudos to the government in showing this commitment to be open to assessing their progress, and then hopefully identifying the gaps and using that to improve on what progress is being made.
All right, thank you for saying that it's good to acknowledge the progress, but we also have a lot to do. How can we reconcile the progress that has been made as regards the reduction in payment of bribes with the fact that corruption still remains a significant problem in Nigeria?
Sorry, I don't know if it's the mic. Sorry, could you please repeat?
I said that how can we, yes, talk about the progress that has been made and also reconcile some of these factors in the sense that corruption still remains a big problem in the country?
Okay, thank you. I think one thing we need to understand is corruption, combating, preventing corruption is not just government's responsibility alone. I think it requires all of the different key stakeholders, CSOs, governments, citizens themselves. So the fight against corruption needs a multi-stakeholder approach. So everybody needs to be on board. I would say that as citizens are saying no, governments also, if we see government responding in kind, and then maybe CSOs and all the relevant partners, donor partners are supporting, it would help in a great deal. So I would sort of say that a multi-stakeholder approach to addressing the issues around corruption is essential for us to kind of get to the desired place we want to go. Thank you.
All right, let me come to you now, Shamsuddin. Talk to us how government can use these kinds of report to shape or determine the policies it needs to put in place, because the chairman of the ICPC, that's the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, said recently that this National Corruption Survey will help government in the area of policy making.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Before I go into how it will improve in the operations of government or policy people that are working in battling corruption, I will reference some numbers from the report. For instance, the average times or average number of bribe paid within the last 12 months, that is reference period of the survey, November 2022 to October 2023, when we collected the data, we had some decrease from 5.4 to 5.1. It's also an decrease, and it's also a positive improvement from 2019. There is a particular indicator we need to understand, and the policy people need to really focus on it, that is contact rate. Contact rate, when computing this rate, as far as government policy people are concerned, they need to work in reducing how citizens normally had contact with public officials. So for us to improve, or for policy people to improve in combating corruption, they have to create an environment whereby operations or contactless operation can happen between citizens and government officials.
So can you help us with the percentage of those that still pay bribe? According to the reports there, it says it starts about 27% of Nigerians who still pay bribes when interacting with public officials. Help us with that figure and talk to us about the range of persons or the kind of persons in this gap.
So thank you. From my methodological explanation, when I explained the methodology, we collected the data from selected adults. By adults, we mean 18 years and above within the household, where the tablet selected for us to interview during the interview. And we asked them some set of questions across public officials that they normally had contact with. That is police, road safety, teachers, doctors. So first of all, we asked them question on whether they had contact with any of them within the last 12 months. That is the reference period of the survey, November 2022 to October 2023, when we collected the data. So once we established that they had contact with them, we asked them follow-up questions. So when they had contact with them, whether in the discharge of their services, whether they asked them to pay bribe or not. So once they said they asked them to pay bribe, so the numerator for computing the number, the 27% you asked me, the numerator is whether they asked them to pay bribe and they pay, or they asked them to pay bribe and they refused. So all of them will be part of the numerator of computing the prevalence rate. Then why the denominator is among those that had contact with those public officials within that reference period of the survey. So the 27% was computed using SDG 16.5.1, adults that were asked to pay bribe and they pay, or adults that were asked to pay bribe but they refused, among those that had contact with the public officials. There is improvement, as I mentioned, in this survey, because during the last survey we collected information on refusal rates only from a selected public officials. But the improvement now, we collected refusals rate across all public officials that citizens had contact with during the reference period of the survey. So if you check the report, prevalence rate without refusals is at 27%, while prevalence rate with refusal will be 34%. So that's how we computed the number using the formula I just mentioned now.
All right, let's get over to Princess now. Princess, you said in the course of carrying out this survey, there were gaps identified. And I am wondering what these gaps are and how the UNODC can support Nigeria's anti-corruption efforts.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to anti-corruption. But in the report, we put what we call the policy recommendation that kind of helps to make recommendations to governments about how to address the gap. One of them is focus on what citizens need. That's very important. Shamsu just mentioned about those government institution or public institution where there's still some, lot of work to do in terms of the prevalence, like in the health sector, education, public utility. So that is citizens saying that these are the areas that affect us. So we're encouraging government to say, focus on what citizens need, because that is what is going to create the most impact for any common man. And just to add that, the focus of the report really is about bribery, petty corruption. So, what the ordinary man, has to face in trying to make ends meet in a day, the kind of challenges they face. So focus on what is important to citizens, address those areas where citizens are saying we feel a lot of impact in these areas. Another policy recommendation is to empower citizens. Empower them, encourage these positive trends that we're seeing here. Those who are refusing, try to reward people who refuse to pay bribe, but also create deterrence by, taking measures to kind of address those who are not complying with what is the regulations or going against the rule. And I think that would really help people kind of, continue in this positive trend. And then a third one I would mention, there are a couple of more, but just for time, a third one I would mention is recognizing that the experiences the gendered experiences in corruptions are different. Women experience with corruption is different from those of men. The report itself actually pointed out that men, in comparison to their female counterparts, are likely to be solicit for bribe or continue in a bribe-seeking behavior. But there are sectors where women are predominantly higher, and in those sectors we see women still, being the culprit in that regard. So it's not really about men or women, it's sort of, gender itself, and we need to empower both, but recognize their difference. There's still a lot in terms of women who kind of still face other forms of bribery, like sextortion, as it's called, or sexual corruption as well, and government needs to put measures in place. The other part is that, and this is one of the other aspects I think Shamsu mentioned earlier, that the report takes in one new aspect, was how corruption affects people with disability. And we see that regardless of whether you have some form of disability or not, corruption affects you the same. But the impact on people with disability is quite, enormous, because they're already having challenge to deal with, but then having to pay bribe or, to access services that should be by rights given to them. It's, it takes a toll on them. And we're saying to government that, kind of build systems or measures in place to take into consideration these people, vulnerable people, women, even youths and people with disability as well. So I think I'll stop here. There are more policy recommendations in the report as well.
But you haven't addressed the second leg of my question, where I said that how UNODC intends to help Nigeria fight corruption, having identified these gaps.
Okay, of course. Thank you very much for reminding me. So for the second question, UNODC work in Nigeria is premised on two things. One, the fact that we are the custodian of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. So we are always here to support state parties like Nigeria in helping them fulfill the, in helping them, supporting them in implementing the different provisions of corruption. So in that aspect, we work with different partners, different national partners to achieve that. And I'll give you an example, which is the work we've done with the police very recently. After the second corruption survey came, we kind of started supporting the police, providing technical assistance to the police on how to improve their oversight and internal oversight and external oversight mechanisms. That is one way in which we can support government. But of course, depending on how the request comes in, UNODC is committed to helping different stakeholders, the government, in combating and reducing or preventing corruption at large. I hope that's, yeah.
And back to you, Shamsuddin. With this study you have conducted, with your findings, what would be your recommendations?
My recommendation, as far as MBS is concerned, once we have proper funding that has to do with producing this kind of statistical output, we'll continue to do our own part of the job by producing quality data so that policy people that work in combating the menace will improve in their operations, and we will advise all parties involved to make sure that they check the report very well, as mentioned by Princess, so that they can see recommendations made in the report for them to improve their operations.
And still staying with you, Shamsuddin, there are those who would say that 2023, between 2023 and now, so many things have happened. Waters have gone under the bridge, and that this notion might just be changing, and so may not reflect the true situation on the ground.
So that's why we try to be as transparent as possible. If you check, for instance, average bribe paid during 2019 survey, it was computed to be 5,754. For us to do scientific comparison between 2019 and this current one, we have to adjust for inflation, that is in nominal terms. When we analyze the 2019 survey, we analyze the average bribe paid, as I mentioned, 5,754. When we adjusted for inflation, it's computed to be 11,740 naira. So that's why when you check the headlines of our media houses, they will say there is a reduction. But when we use the actual amount paid in 2019 in nominal terms, it's not a reduction per se, but we have to consider inflation for us to do a robust trend analysis between 2019 and 2023.
And to you, Princess, let's talk about how we can sustain this progress. I understand that this is the third survey, and they also mentioned in the reports that some persons also reported these bribery incidences. What's the place of the Public Complaints Commission in addressing these issues?
I mean, I cannot speak for the Public Complaints Commission, but I would say that all anti-corruption agencies themselves, because we did see some progress being made in reporting to anti-corruption agencies. I think police were the first point of contact for citizens, but anti-corruption agency and the media were the next, medium of channels of reporting. So I would say for anti-corruption agencies is to kind of continue to build, strengthen your measures, strengthen your tools and equipment to encourage citizens reporting, to listen to them, to create that avenue where they're comfortable enough to come to you and report, confidently, without the fear of some form of retaliation or that. And we see that dropping in the report as well, that, citizens can kind of report without fear of some form of retaliation or attack from anyone, and that is good. So I would say continue on that trend, be it the Public Complaints Commission or any other anti-corruption agency. I think it's important to recognize that you're doing something right, and then to build on that so that citizens are more confident and they are heard. But also taking action when such report comes is equally important.
Absolutely, Princess, because that's another thing Nigerians are looking forward to, where persons who are said to have been nabbed for their corrupt practices are seen to be held to account. That is where the citizens repose confidence in the government for walking the talk and not just talking. And I'm wondering if you think that this is enough on the part of citizens to just complain. There are channels, but they want more from government as it is.
Yeah. One thing I would say is that two things, actually. The first is that when it comes to corruption, we need to understand that perception is kind of different from reality, and this report is actually telling us a bit more about, I can think that this is bad because, I've heard so many news, but when you ask citizens the actual experience, so what did you do, how did that happen, you begin to see a different kind of, thing coming out, emerging, as it were. Secondly, I completely agree with you that there is a lot of more work to be done, and it's not just about reporting, it's about taking action. And as I mentioned before, UNODC is sort of committed to helping Nigerian government in achieving that, building the capacity if that is what is needed, strengthening policies and frameworks if that's what is needed, and so on. And I think I will also mention here that we should not forget the states. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done at the grassroots level. So I would encourage all of our stakeholders to kind of, address those issues at the grassroots level, because also they create massive impact in the long term.
All right, and that's a fine place to leave the conversation. Thank you so much, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. That's the National Program Officer Anti-Corruption, Princess Chifiero, for your time, as well as Principal Data Analyst, National Bureau of Statistics, Shamsuddin Lawal. Thank you for your time as well.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Right.